966-95 Patriot 957-2874. I guess we have to wish her congratulations on her nuptials. Alex Smith is now Alex Wilkes, and she is the executive director of America Rising PAC, AmericaRisingPAC.org. How's it going?
Thank you so much for the kind words. Pretty close to Wilkow, no?
Yes, and my wife has a friend with the last name Wilkat, so it's even though it's totally an unrelated last name. You got married in the middle of all this?
I did. I did. I snuck in there right during Labor Day, and took advantage of the down weekend just before the hustle and bustle of the campaign season here.
All right, so I think one funny little poll number came out today, and I know you're monitoring a lot of races, and you're actually putting resources into some of the races. The talk of Robert O'Rourke, I don't want to call this guy Beto. It's a high cheekbones name for him, right? I mean, his name is Robert O'Rourke. He's making up this he's trying to, I guess, cash in on having a Hispanic nickname that he gave himself. But all the talk that Robert O'Rourke was going to beat Ted Cruz, the Gallup poll just came out and showed Ted Cruz is ahead 9 points.
Yeah, I always thought that was a little bit of a stretch. I mean,
he's running on gun control in Texas.
I think that for progressives, they look at Beto, Robert O'Rourke, and they see someone who kind of fits that Obama aspirational mold. The words that they're saying, they sound pretty, they sound exciting, but they don't make a whole lot of sense when you actually break them down. But in a state like Texas, I just don't think that state is quite ready for those kind of policies. Although I would say, as just sort of a cautionary warning here, that Texas does represent a number of demographic challenges for the party and for conservatives in the future. So it's not the time for Republicans and conservatives to take their foot off the gas.
No, they must go out and vote. And here's what I would say to anyone in this game of identity politics. If you are a Texican or of any other, I had a friend say that to me once. He's like, I call it. He was saying he referred to himself as a Texican, and he goes, that makes us different than lots of other Latino voters. He's like, we like being in Texas, and if you are Hispanic, whether directly of Mexican descent or Central American or South American, there's a reason why you went to Texas. There's a reason why you went to Texas and not New York and not New Jersey and not California. Don't turn Texas into something that you then have to flee from.
Exactly. And I think that, with Governor Abbott's policies out there, and certainly the kind of policies that, people like John Cornyn and Ted Cruz are voting for back in D.C., that's the kind of leadership that Texans are ultimately looking for. And someone like Beto O'Rourke, I think that he
did it again.
I'm sorry. I violated the rules of the show. But, I think he has the appeal in places like San Francisco and Manhattan cocktail parties. I don't think that when you actually
But if you're playing the game of identity politics, you're saying we need Latinos in leadership. You got one, Ted Cruz. You're right there in Texas. Same argument in Florida. You got Marco Rubio. It's not like Latinos are absent in high power positions in Texas and Florida.
Well, and in fact, I think that if you look at the Democrats' leadership, they have a notoriously older and not diverse, set of leaders at the top when they purport to be the party of diversity. I mean, I think we have, differences in our party is that we have a lot of young people who are interested in running for office, who have already gotten involved into politics in the Republican Party at the state level, which is a story that sort of goes untold in a lot of places. You can look at people like Elise Stefanik, who was the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. She's a great Republican from New York. We just have a tremendous, number of individuals in the Republican Party who I think represent the true diversity, especially the diversity of thought within our party, whereas Democrats just sort of have this feigned diversity and really just a bunch of old white guys leading the party.
Well, I mean, have you been watching John James? I mean, this guy, we gave him one of his first national radio interviews, and
he's a rock star.
That's in the literal sense. And Trump has endorsed him, and I think he is really going to be the story. If he can take out Debbie Stabenow, That's going to be the story of the midterm elections. But I know you're really focused on Representative Dave Bratt. Is he really at risk?
Yeah, well, look, I think that just as a general matter, when we're looking at the midterm elections, we're always looking at a situation where the party that's in power is at risk of losing some of those seats in the Senate and the House, because the other side in the intervening period between the election and the presidential election and 2 years later, they've gotten excited, they've gotten motivated based on the policies that have been coming out of the last 2 years. And, we see, unfortunately, on our side, some complacency. We see a lot of Trump voters, for example, in 2016, who sort of have checked the box and said, okay, I did my part, and I got President Trump in office. But 2 years later, the president needs those people to come back out and vote, or he's going to be facing impeachment from the House of Representatives. So, and I think the president knows that. He's been starting to work that into a lot of his rally speeches, if you've been listening lately. But, I think so as a general matter, I think Republicans ought to be concerned about, we ought to be taking seriously any number of races. And so I think that Dave Bratt, of course, he is the famous sort of Tea Party leader who took out Eric Cantor back in the first Tea Party wave. He's running against a woman named Abigail Spanberger. America Rising really delved into some research here that produced some interesting results about Ms. Spanberger. We found that she taught at a school called the Islamic Saudi Academy, which even Chuck Schumer called to be shut down based on what they were teaching. So they've produced a bunch of questionable characters. She didn't want voters to know about this. America Rising dug through her records to find this out. And so I think.
Whoa! Was she at a high school keg party in 1982?
She was at a place called the Islamic Saudi Academy.
Oh, well, that we can't talk about unless she was at a keg party in 1982 in somewhere around the D.C. area. We can't talk about these things.
Well, I can tell you this: that the valedictorian from one of the valedictorians from that school where she taught was arrested eventually for plotting to kill President Bush. So,
well, that sounds like a perfect Democrat.
Yeah. So, this really, I don't think that this bodes very well for Ms. Spanberger, but, I think it's one of those things where it shows the value of opposition research. It shows the value of what we do at America Rising, is that in a news cycle, like as you mentioned, with just a number of different topics in our first 5 minutes here, the news cycle could be dominated any given hour by something else. So it's
like Keith Ellison?
Yeah, exactly.
I have not heard that story in weeks. I have not. The Keith Ellison story has magically disappeared off the news cycle. Even
though the accuser recently took to a evening or primetime national news appearance to speak about her encounter with
but she wasn't at a keg party in 1982,
and she actually accused the Democrats of trying to bully and shame her out of making these accusations. Yet Keith Ellison stands still as a prominent leader within the Democratic Party. So I think that there's definitely a note of hypocrisy there.
Are you doing any work on the Bob Hugin, Bob Menendez race? Because, honestly, is there in any real world, Bob Menendez should be one of the most damaged people. And yet this guy keeps getting reelected. He beats every single rap and scandal that comes his way. It fascinates me how this guy is still in the United States Senate.
So we are definitely taking a look at that race, and I think that really has the makings of being one of the great sleeper races of this cycle, because, Bob Menendez is very, very badly damaged by the number of ethical accusations and investigations that he has endured over the last couple of years. So, I think you have, and importantly, it's not just that Bob Menendez has presented himself as an unsavory character. I think Bob Hugin has put forward a credible alternative. I love his slogan of "Send in a Marine." I think that he has a real clean-cut image, someone who served his country, someone who went on to create, pharmaceutical miracles for a number of people who are suffering from, life-debilitating diseases. And what's funny about Bob Hugin and Bob Menendez is that they actually came from the same place. It's just that Bob Menendez decided to become a career politician, where Bob Hugin, I think, has produced a lot more for this country than Bob Menendez ever has. So I think that it's not just that Bob Menendez is a bad actor in the situation; it's that Bob Hugin is an acceptable and great alternative for New Jersey voters that they're increasingly turning to, particularly with all the TV that they've been putting up in the state, to say, I'm going to take a second look at this guy, and this Bob Menendez character might just be a little too much this time around.
What's funny is that right in the district where I live in New Jersey 11, and we have Jay Weber, an assemblyman, running against Mikey Sherrill.
Great conservative.
She refuses to run ads calling herself a Democrat. I find this fascinating. She's running on her naval resume and the fact that she was a federal prosecutor, but nowhere in any of her campaigning does she say she's running as a Democrat. That I find fascinating. And look, it's funny. Like you just said, Bob Hugin is running on his military record, which the Democrats are saying, meh, but if we don't vote for Mikey Sherrill, we hate veterans and women.
She is a really interesting character because she is someone who is pretending like New Jersey voters in New Jersey's 11th congressional district, they don't know who Nancy Pelosi is. They've never heard of her. They've never heard of National Democrats. They've never heard of the resistance movement. They've never heard of people calling to abolish ICE. There's just Mikey Sherrill, who is, pleasantly down the middle and is going to fight hard for them. The reality is that Sherrill's being backed by the same Democratic forces that are controlled by Nancy Pelosi and all of the usual, Soros-like characters. And she's, this is a person who is not who she says she is. This is a person who is going to veer way to the left after the election, should she be elected. And again, I think that this was another race where, we had Congressman Frelinghuysen who ended up not running, so it turned into an open seat. And Democrats have been heavily favored, or not heavily favored, but they were favored to win the seat, according to a lot of calculations out there. But Jay Weber has come forward, I think, as a very serious contender based on his own, sterling, conservative, solid record that he brings from the assembly. This is a guy that doesn't back down from a fight, incredibly smart. And I think just an incredible leader who is really giving her a run for her money. So, I think that this is another area where we've seen a credible alternative emerge to someone who, or to in a race where Democrats were sort of presumed to win.
Well, not to make this too much about Joycey and all, but like I said, I live in the district, and here's you don't live in New Jersey 11, do you?
Not New Jersey 11.
All right. Here's what I think is happening in New Jersey 11. And this is something, not to make this too, down the map focused, but this is something that everybody across the country should understand. That the Frelinghuysen family, I think, has held a position in government on some level since before the revolution, right? It's been, yeah. And everything around the Morristown area is named after the Frelinghuysen Arboretum, Frelinghuysen Boulevard, Frelinghuysen Middle School. Everything is Frelinghuysen. It's kind of like the Robert Byrd of West Virginia, and most famously, their family owned the Ballantine Brewing Company. Anyway, that seat was held by Rodney Frelinghuysen for, I think it was 30 years? 25, 30 years. He's been there forever. And look, he's not a hard-charging conservative, right? He's kind of your typical Northeastern Republican that just got reelected. But here's what I could tell you about New Jersey 11, because I live just down the road from Picatinny Arsenal, right? So you have a big military and veteran presence in the Rockaway, Jefferson, Denville, Morris Plains area, but Randolph area. That's why I think Mikey Sherrill is running on her military record and not as a Democrat.
I think that that's absolutely right. And that was part of the Democrat strategy all along for this midterm election. They wanted to try to recruit.
One more thing. Hold on before we go. And the other side of that is in New Jersey 11, if you look around, you can clearly see that the state has been making an effort to impose COA housing, which is they're moving all of these. They have moved over the past generation. There's a huge federal housing complex off of Route 10. They've been moving it into the downtowns of Denville, and you see it in Rockaway. You see it. All of a sudden, these apartment complexes are springing up, and you have to ask yourself, who's paying for them? Where are these new residents coming from? It's obvious the Democrats have been redistributing their voters from some of the cities into the suburbs. So that's why you're seeing the shift. It's not all of us. It's not that the Democrats have come into the red-ish purple counties and made a better argument. They've moved their voters in. But anyway, that was the point.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that redistricting is something that's hurt Republicans in New Jersey, certainly not just at the congressional level, but also at the assembly level as well. But Mikey Sherrill, she represents the kind of Democrat that the National Party Democrats were hoping to recruit. So she was a successful recruit for them in New Jersey 11. In places where they haven't been as successful. So, for example, Nebraska's 2nd district. This is a seat that they badly want to take back from the Republicans, and it's definitely a swing district. However, Cara Eastman, the Democrat who's currently running in that district, knocked out the establishment Democrat who is supposed to be the front runner in this race. And this is a woman who supports single payer, just the litany of Bernie Sanders proposals out there. And so I think that that's one where, that was a letdown for them. And I think really, it foretells where the Democrats are headed in the future, that you have these liberal, these liberal primary contenders, some of whom associate with the Democratic Socialists of America, and they are challenging these establishment Democrats and dragging these races way to the left, which I think is, definitely outside the mainstream of where most American voters are. So I think that in some of these swing districts that Democrats had hoped to take back, whether or not they get a blue wave, there are some places where they've definitely put some people in who are untenable for the position.
All right, I got to leave it there. We went pretty long on this. Not that you're not fun and interesting to interview, but I got to take my break because we got to get out of the way for Sean Hannity after the next segment. Alex Wilkes, formerly Alex Smith, Executive Director of America Rising PAC, AmericaRisingPAC.org. We'll have you back a bunch of times before the midterms.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrew.
All right, 1-866-95-PATRIOT, 957-28.